Once upon a time, our story unfolds amidst the breathtaking desert landscapes of a distant and captivating planet. On this isolated base, an elite team of 8 astronauts embarks on a mission dubbed Mars War, expected to span a mere 6 months. Their purpose is clear as they traverse the harsh terrain aboard a specially crafted vehicle, carrying Vincent and Rebecca at the forefront. As they journey, a colossal sandstorm looms on the horizon, prompting them to prepare for a perilous journey through the blinding tempest. Rebecca, observing the storm's trajectory toward their base, worries aloud about its impact on Kim, a fellow astronaut on the mission. Sensing Vincent's unease at the sight, in an attempt to reassure him, Rebecca brushes off the impending dust storm as harmless. However, Vincent's concern isn't about the approaching sand. There's something else troubling him. After weathering the storm, Vincent and Rebecca discover Kim meticulously collecting samples in a nearby area. Vincent urges her to return with them, yet Kim dismisses his request with indifference, defying even Captain Charles's plea for her to return to the base while they wait. Vincent sat down to jot down the things he'd miss about Mars, but as he started listing them, most were about Kim. Rebecca couldn't help but smile at how prominently she featured in his thoughts. Meanwhile, Kim, getting into the vehicle, seemed discontented. When Rebecca inquired if she found what she was looking for, Kim's grumpiness showed. She lamented about the insufficient 6 months, feeling she hadn't made any breakthroughs on the Red Planet. Back at their base, Charles called Vincent to find out why he was late. Charles explained that they needed Vincent's help to fix the systems and establish a stable connection with Aurora. Soon after, a spaceship arrived to take them back to Earth. Richard managed a brief connection with Aurora, explaining the power outages caused by the storm. The Aurora team confirmed their arrival in 19 hours, but before they could conclude, another power outage plunged the entire base into darkness, disconnecting the call abruptly. While researching the sample he found, Marco asks to go back outside. He uses the excuse that the gamma sensors aren't working where he put them. He tells Charles they might be damaged by the storm, and urges him to hurry back for a briefing. Charles lets him go but tells him to take Richard along since they're both suited up and ready to leave. Vincent, Rebecca, and Kim arrived, with Kim notably displeased about being called back while the men were set to leave. Marco directed Richard to prepare equipment for additional samples, discreetly mentioning a molecular anomaly he hadn't disclosed to Charles yet. Vincent swiftly focused on repairing the damaged transmission upon returning to base. He attempted to apologize to Robert, acknowledging that Kim's actions had caused him to miss an opportunity to connect with his daughter on Earth. Venturing into another room, Vincent and Robert observed a heated argument between Kim and Charles, escalating significantly after the captain's departure. Tension soared as Kim delved into Marco's private log, convinced he had ventured out under false pretenses, while Lauren tried to intervene. Kim's determination to uncover hidden information escalated, certain she'd unearthed something secretive. Meanwhile, Ashley adjusted the microscope, capturing the team's attention as they gathered to view an image on the screen, revealing Marco's astounding discovery of life on the planet. However, Kim, distrustful of Marco, insisted that such a groundbreaking finding shouldn't be entrusted to someone who had deceived them. This skepticism prompted Marco to contact the vehicle he and Richard had used. When he reached Richard, Marco's unauthorized excursion was disclosed, prompting Charles to caution against further interference. In a sudden turn of events, a sinkhole emerged beneath Marco as he secured the samples, causing him to panic and vanish into the ground. Richard urgently called for help, informing the team of the distressing incident. As Charles and Lauren reached the site, the devastation over Marco's loss hit Lauren hard. Despite her grief, she selflessly offered to stay behind, suggesting the crew return with the appropriate gear to recover Marco's body. Charles and Richard made their way back to the base, finding the rest of the crew shocked and saddened by the recent events, except for Kim, who remained solely focused on the mission. During the mission control address, a disturbed Richard, grappling with guilt, turned to drinking. The connection with Mission Control brought condolences for the loss of their friend. They assured the crew that arrangements were being made for Marco's family, giving the green light for the retrieval mission. Despite the support, the weight of the tragedy lingered. Vincent and Charles headed back to the accident site, attempting to contact Lauren, but finding it impossible to get through. Upon their arrival, Lauren was nowhere to be found, leading them to believe she had disregarded orders and ventured inside the sinkhole, leaving the crew in a state of uncertainty and concern. Vincent descended partway into the hole and spotted something odd, almost like a thread-like substance clinging to the walls. Instantly, he was overwhelmed by a sense of panic, gasping for breath and nearly passing out. His crew swiftly pulled him back up to the surface, where he struggled to regain composure. He explained that he'd glimpsed the depths, but found no trace of their missing colleagues, Lauren and Marco. As they puzzled over the disappearance, Robert's call drew attention to 2 sets of footprints leading back to the base. Perplexed, he questioned why they hadn't used the rover for their return. Kim receives a call from Charles alerting her to the possibility of casualties. Richard and Kim are preparing the medical pack. When Richard and Kim notice Marco and Lauren approaching the airlock, they quickly rush to open the door and let them in while they check the monitors from their arrival. As he takes off Marco's headgear, the sight shocks him. Marco's exposed bones seem scorched, and his flesh appears to have been eaten away. The disfigured Marco picks up the drill from the ground and stabs Richard in the stomach, trying to contain his gushing abdomen while holding his guts within. Richard alerts him to the danger by pressing the emergency button. However, when she dashes into the space, she's greeted by a different zombie-like entity that was previously Lauren in a panic. Kim tries to flee, but Lauren follows closely after. Additionally, the control room reports that Richard attempts to alert the team members who are traveling to the base about the approaching threat. However, his wound was too deep for him to be able to stand and reach the microphone in the adjacent room. While trying to rescue herself, Kim battles the zombies tooth and nail and orders Vincent to stay outside. Kim panics when Charles enters the base and reveals her what happened to their pals. He promises to buy her some time while she gets ready. While Marco cracks the glass once in her suit, Charles attempts to hold off on opening the door. Charles gets stabbed in the chest while attempting to pursue Kim as she dashes outside. In order to prevent the beasts from pursuing them, Charles breaks the door once he discovers Kim. The group, Charles in tow, makes its way to the other dome to retrieve the equipment required to preserve the man's life. As they lay him down on one of the tables, Kim observes that not much blood was there, even though it should have been. Additionally, it appears as though the region surrounding the wound is becoming black, almost as if he was becoming uncontrollably like a zombie. Robert is attacked by Charles, who tries to grasp his throat, but the team stops him. Robert, horrified by what he'd seen and the constant losses they'd suffered, tells Vincent that all he wants is to go home. Kim binds both of Charles' hands to the table out of fear that he could return from the dead. They discover via the cameras positioned around the camp that the zombies have succeeded in blowing apart the reinforced steel and are now at large when they hear the sirens going off. A few minutes later, they begin pounding on the dome's door in an attempt to reach the survivors. Vincent volunteers to go back and make the necessary connections using the air ducts that link the base to the dome, so they can let Aurora know what's going on. Rebecca also takes a sample of Charles's infected wounds and examines it under a microscope in the lab. Upon closer inspection, the team discovers that the bloodstream was contaminated and that live organisms, which they later discovered were only bacteria, were swimming within. Rebecca has an idea to utilize several medicines they had on hand. In order to test the hypothesis, they inject one of the antibiotics into Charles's system, and after a brief period of convulsions that really frightened me, he passes out. When Rebecca checks Charles's blood again, she finds that the germs aren't growing and aren't moving around much, which makes her think that they may finally have a weapon against the zombies. Charles becomes silent and his body becomes still. Kim and Robert successfully lure a zombie into the pressurized chamber located between the main door and the dome's entrance. They proceed to release antibiotics in gas form to combat the zombie threat. Meanwhile, Rebecca observes a troubling development. The bacteria is showing signs of resistance to the antibiotics, initiating its reproduction once more. As this unfolds, Vincent at the base attempts to reach Aurora, only to be thwarted by a power outage. Hearing a noise emanating from another room, he investigates, shining his light into the darkness. Richard, exhibiting signs of infection, becomes aggressive and attacks Vincent, attempting to disrupt his oxygen supply, forcing him away. Vincent, in a panicked rush, retreats to the dome through the tunnels, or gently communicating over the comms to open the seal and don their masks. The activation triggers a high alert within the dome. As Vincent clambers out, Richard pursues him, grasping for his leg. Reacting swiftly, Kim dashes to the lab, tossing jars of antibiotics at Richard's face before attempting to escape. However, the zombie lunges at Kim, bringing her down. Despite her efforts to leave the lab, a fearful Robert locks her inside, hoping to contain the threat, unintentionally leaving his colleague behind. Meanwhile, Vincent and Rebecca, on their way to one of the vehicles, encounter the zombie they had trapped in the decompression chamber earlier. In a tense confrontation, the zombie injures them before they flee towards one of the vehicles. Determined to rendezvous at the landing area and await the arrival of the Aurora, they press forward. As they journeyed, their vehicle suddenly halted. drained of power. Vincent proposed turning back to aid Rebecca, but Robert, suspecting her of being infected, opposed the idea, suggesting they abandon her. A terrified Rebecca, fearing she wasn't the sole infected person, pleaded with Robert to reveal his neck. His frightened expression prompted Robert to propose heading to the previous site where a fully charged vehicle awaited them. The team directed their course towards the rover. Arriving at the location, Robert volunteered to retrieve the charged vehicle, aiming to make amends for his earlier words. While there, he contacted Vincent, insisting he arrive alone as Rebecca was infected and furious. Vincent urgently cautioned the others to return, yet Robert, feeling he had no alternative, persisted. Vincent set out to intercept his deceitful colleague, but Robert initiated the engine and sped away. Reuniting at the rover, Rebecca and Vincent, running low on power, braved a looming storm, hoping its gusts would obscure their trail from the pursuing zombies. The next day, Vincent awakens to an empty rover, realizing Rebecca had left him behind out of fear that she might harm him. Following her trail, he discovers her nearby. As he catches up, she warns him of her inability to control the changes and urges him to stay away. Ignoring her plea, he tries to restrain her, but she resists, removing her helmet, succumbing instantly to the harsh conditions, oxygen deprivation and low pressure, devastating Vincent. In anguish, he cradles his fallen friend, tears streaming down his face. Suddenly, Rebecca transforms into a zombie, attempting to attack him and breach his suit. Overpowering her, Vincent grapples with her, using a large rock to crush her skull, ending her reanimated threat. Grief-stricken, he rises and continues his journey on foot towards the landing site. Receiving transmissions from the ground team, he notifies the Mars crew of their arrival, noticing the encroaching zombies heading towards the ship, a grim sight in the distance. Vincent attempts to relay a calm warning, advising his colleagues to keep their doors closed, but his attempts to connect fail. Horrified, he hears the agonizing screams of his teammates as they're attacked. Upon his arrival, he encounters a scene of devastation, lifeless bodies strewn around. With no alternative, he prioritizes his survival, seeking refuge within the ship and sealing the door behind him. Upon reaching the control center, he discovers Robert seated at the pilot's station. Resolute not to allow the infection to reach Earth, Vincent confronts the infected Robert, engaging in a desperate struggle. Despite disorienting Robert momentarily, he manages to initiate the ship's launch, hurtling them into space. Realizing it's their only chance, Vincent summons every ounce of strength and bravery to subdue zombie Robert, rendering him unconscious. With grim determination, he ejects Robert's body out of the ship, severing the threat it posed. Vincent feels a droplet of infected blood land on his face, the chilling realization dawning upon him that he might now be infected too. Fearing the worst, he swiftly sends a message to Mission Control, recounting the tragic events on Mars and detailing his own uncertain condition. Expressing the lack of sufficient fuel for the rendezvous point but enough supplies to wait for rescue if deemed safe, Vincent discloses his apprehension of potential infection. He lays out the grim option of using the remaining fuel to drop out of orbit, accepting a swift demise in Earth's atmosphere. Expecting Mission Control to receive the distressing message, Vincent settles in, the weight of his fate heavy in the vast expanse of space. 15 minutes pass, leaving Vincent alone, floating in the emptiness, waiting for a response. And here, the movie comes to an end. Thanks for tuning in.